Hi, my name is Anya Ahern. I'm excited to be at the Tableau Customer Conference in Washington, D.C. And today I am going to talk about trying to make your data visualizations pop by using design and emotion, and also the concept of treating your data visualizations like a product that people want to consume, and how that might change your understanding of how you want to develop and present the data. So let's jump right in. Sorry. Little navigation issue. All right, so if your data visualization was a product, would you spend your time, just like you spend your hard-earned money, to purchase it or to look at it? So I like to think of every morning I wake up and I have hundreds of emails and a bunch of tweets and Instagram and some Pinterest and all these different things demanding my attention. So why should I want to spend the time to look at a particular data visualization? And if you think about that as a product, what would make me want to consume it? The answer is that, well, as a product, your data visualization should provide value to the consumer, and this value is based on their perceived goals and the context in which the data is used. So to use an example of shoes, which shoe would you think is the best? All right, very, very different shoes. And of course, it depends on the goal of why you're wearing the shoe, right? Do you want to build a house or do some construction work? Or are you just going to hang out at the beach and go surfing? Or are you going to go out for a night on the town? Similarly, when we apply that to different types of data visualization, you want to select, of course, the right chart dependent on the goal of what you're trying to communicate with the data. And to take that one step further, within each of those visualizations, they need to be presented in the context of the data product as a whole. So what are the other charts? How do they interact with each other? How is this going to be deployed? Are you going to just put it up on a web browser? Is it going to be part of a product that is walked through in a tutorial? So you have to think about the entire context of the whole visualization as a finished packaged product. So keeping that in mind, is this a good data visualization? And this was one of the first visualizations that I played with way back in like Tableau 4. And it's showing out different correlations between obesity rates and other factors. And you might look at this and go, oh my God, that's the most obnoxious thing I've ever seen in my life. But when we put it in the discussion and we talk about goals and context, I had actually built this while on an airplane to Scotland with my 5-year-old, who had turned to me and said, Mommy, what is it that you do all day at work? And so I kind of quickly built this with some data that I had downloaded previously, and it was just very fun for my son, who was a 5-year-old at the time, obviously could instantly relate to the bunnies popping around, and although he might not have understood what a correlation is, he got the idea of, okay, well, we're charting things out on a graph, and it was fun and interesting for him because it involved marshmallow seeds. So in the context of we were on a plane ride and I was trying to communicate to a 5-year-old, this actually probably was a successful data visualization product. All right, moving on. When we're designing a product, like a data visualization, oftentimes there are lots of constraints. Just like if you were designing a shoe, you'd have to worry about material costs, you'd have to worry about shipping, you'd have to worry about production and manufacturing. Same things apply when you're designing a data visualization as a product. You also have many constraints. For example, who is the person that's going to be consuming this product? Do they have a deep understanding of the topic, or are they an absolute newbie to the data being presented? How is the data visualization going to be deployed? Is it just going to be up on a website? Is it going to be on a huge monitor that's constantly being updated in a large public area? Is it going to be part of a blog post where you'll be able to add a lot of text and data annotation layers? So all these things, and then of course timeline, deadline, right? Everyone at work knows people want it yesterday, so that certainly restricts the amount of time and design and effort that you can put into building something. Other product constraints are the data. I always say data has its own little wicked sense of humor because it's never just perfect. You always have to spend some time scrubbing it, cleaning it, maybe doing a little ETL. The data quality might not always be correct. And then you also have to consider things like data volume, right? If there are 20 million rows, it might take a little bit of time for the result to come back, and that could provide frustrations for the user. So you have all these different constraints, And another large area of constraint is you as the designer. What is your skill set? What type of tools do you know? What is your level of understanding of math and statistics? Your level of understanding of the data? Your ability to use multiple tools, not just Tableau, but different databases, different aggregation types, and also your abilities and your understanding of design, and also your ability to add something to the data, to add a level of emotion, to create excitement about the data, to drive user engagement. So out of all these different types of constraints, the ones that you actually have the most control over are what you can bring to the product as a designer. And so that's going to lead us into this discussion of, well, does using emotion and using design skew the data? I know most people here have probably read a lot of Edward Tufte material, and we're all very aware of chart junk, and that's not what we're not going to try and add junk to it. We're going to try and create a little impact on the data using design and emotion. So just, again, to address this question of, well, doesn't doing these types of things skew the data? My counter-argument is that any time we try and categorize things and graph them out, we're already changing the meaning of the phenomenon that we're trying to explain. And just kind of very fun tongue-in-cheek, there's a very famous Swiss artist and comedian, and his main project is what he calls the Kunstaufräumen, which means he tidies up works of art. So one of his main examples he examines here, this is a Paul Klee photo, which is in the before, and he goes through and he goes, well, it starts off with an orange square and then a red square, and they're not very neat and orderly, and then there's a blue again. And then the pattern starts, but then there's no blue. And then up here, there's just this white square, like he ran out of paint. And he gets very frustrated, and he ends up organizing and stacking it to try and create some sense of organization of this Paul Klee painting. And he goes on and does this for many other famous works of art, for Magritte and Van Gogh. One of my favorite is this pointillism, which he then just throws into a bag of ducks in order to organize it. You know, talking about nature and the universe. Well, that's a little messy, the stars and the solar system. So let's organize those and categorize those. And a very funny one is the Jackson Pollock, where he just has no idea how to organize it, so he just puts the paint back in the paint can. So this concept of, well, how would you, as a statistician, explain these works of art? And this is kind of what we do with data. We're talking about different phenomenons, and in order to explain them better, we're creating these categories. Okay? And so, again, to support this theory, I would say that every time you communicate, you're already providing your own kind of spin or your own kind of translation to the data. So that's what we do when we're creating these charts and graphs, is translating something when we communicate it. Another example of this, which is very fun, is statistician Sebastian Vaneke, and he does a TED Talk on, if you looked at all the most successful TED Talks and all the worst TED Talks, and you extracted the words that were commonly used, you could construct, in theory, the most perfect TED Talk ever, because you'd be looking at those words. So I'm just going to play a couple minutes of that, just so you get an idea of kind of fun. Take a minute to load.
If you go on the TED website, you can currently find there over a full week of TED Talk videos, over 1.3 million words of transcripts, and millions of user ratings. And that's a huge amount of data. And it got me wondering, if you took all this data and put it through statistical analysis, could you reverse engineer a TED Talk? Could you create the ultimate TED Talk? And also, could you create the worst possible TED Talk that they would still let you get away with? To find this out, I looked at three things. I looked at the topic that you should choose, I looked at how you should deliver it, and the visuals on stage. Now, with the topic, there's a whole range of topics you can choose, but you should choose wisely, because your topic strongly correlates with how users will react to your talk. Now, to make this more concrete, let's look at the list of top 10 words that statistically stick out in the most favorite TED Talks and in the least favorite TED Talks. So if you came here to talk about how French coffee will spread happiness in our brains, that's a go. Whereas if you wanted to talk about your project involving oxygen, girls, aircraft, actually I would like to hear that talk, but statistics say it's not so good. Oh well, if you generalize this, the most favorite TED Talks are those that feature topics we can connect with both easily and deeply, such as happiness, our own body, food, emotions, and the more technical topics such as architecture, materials, and strangely enough, men. Those are not good topics to talk about. How should you deliver your talk? TED is famous for keeping a very sharp eye on the clock, so they're going to hate me for revealing this, because actually you should talk as long as they will let you, because the most favorite TED Talks are on average over 50% longer than the least favorite ones. And this holds true for all ranking lists on TED.com, except if you want to have a talk that's beautiful, inspiring, or funny, then you should be brief. But other than that, talk until they drag you off the stage. Now, while you're pushing the clock, there's a few rules to obey. I found these rules out by comparing the statistics of 4-word phrases that appear more often in the most favorite TED Talk as opposed to the least favorite TED Talk. I'll give you 3 examples. First of all, I must, as a speaker, provide a service to the audience and talk about what I will give you instead of saying what I can have. Secondly, it's imperative that you do not cite the New York Times. Finally, it's okay for the speaker that you don't have to take intellectual capacity. If I don't understand something, I can just say, etc., etc. You'll all stay with me. It's perfectly fine. Now, let's go to the visuals. The most obvious visual thing on stage is the speaker. And analysis shows if you want to be among the most favorite TED speakers, you should let your hair grow a little bit longer than others. Make sure you wear your glasses and be slightly more dressed up than the average TED speaker. Slides are okay, though you might consider going for props. And now the most important thing, that is the mood on stage. Color plays a very important role. Color closely correlates with the ratings that talks get on the website. For example, fascinating talks contain a statistically high amount of exactly this blue color, much more than the average TED Talk. Ingenious TED Talks, much more this green color, etc., etc.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause that. If you want to watch the rest, you can Google Sebastian Wernicke on YouTube and watch the rest of the talk. But I think it kind of brings it into the point of you're always categorizing things and adding a different interpretation when you are organizing data. So just keep this in mind, that you're actually providing a translation at the same time that you're communicating. I had just been watching the movie Gandhi with my son, and I saw this quote at the very beginning of the movie, not to say that any of our data visualizations are as impressive as the life of Gandhi, but they were concerned when they were creating this movie is how do you describe the life of such a great man in a 3-hour movie? And what it came down to is they wanted to capture the spirit, the essence, to be faithful to what they thought the power and the beauty and all the amazing works were. And so when you're creating a visualization, I think I try to work to try and capture that emotion as well, to what is behind the data. One of the reasons I'm also interested in emotion and design is I have my master's degree in industrial design and product design. And one of my research projects there had started, there was a Thanksgiving, and I was reading an article in a newspaper about a young man that had beaten his mother with his cast iron skillet and hospitalized her. She was severely beaten because she had used soap to try and clean the cast iron skillet. And if any of you have cast iron skillets, you know, you're never supposed to use soap. Very extreme, but I wanted to try and understand, well, why is it that people have these very, very strong attachments to certain cooking objects? And I did a lot of research, and the cast iron skillet was just this nurturing. You had to spend a lot of time curing it and cooking it, and you didn't clean, and you put very greasy things, and you build up kind of this black layer on the bottom that makes it kind of a no-stick surface. And the fact that they had to nurture it and cast iron skillets, they ended up in people's divorce cases over who got it because it was such a strong attachment to this thing that you had to cure and create over time to become this good pan. Other objects that people were very attached to were their knives and their knife sets, and it was just a feeling of control and power, and, we're not really going out there and killing our food anymore, so I think having your really sharp, strong knife set is a very empowering feeling for a lot of people. And then I actually thought one of the interesting things, I interviewed Chuck Williams, who is the head of Williams-Sonoma, and I thought he would have this copper pot or this beautiful, expensive object. And his favorite cooking object was just a very simple paring knife. And he was like, it's just practical. I can use it for everything. It feels comfortable in my hand, and I can just do everything with it. So it was also just looking at these different things. And if people can have these emotional attachments to a specific cooking object, how could I build those same kind of emotions into a data visualization when I created it? And again, it depends on the goal and the context of the visualization, whether or not emotion and using this type of design is appropriate. So we're going to look now at 3 different examples involving guns and murder, and they're very similar data sets and very different goals and context. This one was actually done by the Tableau public marketing head, Ben Jones, and he's looking at the list of fatalities of the different mass shootings in the United States over the years. And this is a very kind of New York Times look and feel. It's just there to convey lots of information. There's a little bit of emotion going on. He's using the color red to represent fatalities. You can go ahead and see across the U.S. where a lot of the fatalities occur. I was shocked to see, hippy-dippy California having the most number of fatalities. Well, thankfully it's in L.A. and San Diego, not where I live in San Francisco. And you can see kind of very dramatically, as he uses the width in a line chart, that these fatalities are actually kind of increasing over time. So that's a little scary. He lists cases and fatalities by the number of people, talks about the types of weapons used, where the killings took place, and then thanks a lot, guys, because, only 1 out of 62 people were female. But this is very factual. He's trying to communicate a lot of information about where these things occurred, how they're increasing over time. So just a very good news type of piece with just a little bit of emotion using the color red to pop and emphasize the fatalities. This next example is actually interactive. I'm going to go back to the web. And this is Jerome Coquier. He works currently at Facebook. I know he's been to some TCC conferences in the past, so maybe you've met him. This is one that he's done, where he's actually showing over time of the year 2010 all the different gun homicides in America. And there's certainly this emotional aspect of each one of those hexagons being a gunshot. And it just keeps going and going, and it's just shoot, shoot, shoot all across the United States. So again, he's using this time and just this build-up to create this, oh my God, there are a lot of gun homicides in the United States, as well as providing an overview of where they're located. And down below, you can actually click on the map and filter and see the information about where it occurred, what month it occurred to, how old the victim was, the relationship of the victim to the killer, and any other details. So he's probably really trying to create an emotional impact piece that goes, whoa, what's going on here, and then allow you to drill down into the data. So you get the idea. It just keeps going and going and going. And this is all just in 1 year. All right, and the last piece that we're going to look at, again, it uses a similar data set. This is actually using the exact same data set in Jerome, and this is done by Periscopic. If any of you are familiar with Kim Reese and Periscopic, they do a lot of work for social good. And this is probably the most emotional of the pieces. Now it's stopped, obviously, in September where we are. So this is, a live kind of piece that's being updated. And here we're talking about, it starts off with one person's life, and it starts as this orange, beautiful arc, and then all of a sudden they're killed. And the rest of the gray arc is based on where they were, their socioeconomic demographics. They created a projected calculation of how long the person would have lived. And so they're totaling up not just the number of people that were killed in 2013, but also what could have been, what was robbed from them. So it's using this very emotional piece. Again, there's no pro-gun, anti-gun, anything like that involved, but I think when you go through each one of these lines, it really represents a story, and it draws you in and just makes you wonder why, what would have happened, why did this have to end? It allows you to break things up by different age ranges, gender, different regions, different times, so you can also interact with the data and get more information about each individual person. So again, this is a very emotional piece. It's not necessarily as easy to see overall where things occurred, what types of weapons were used. So it's, again, the goal was not maybe to provide so much factual data, but rather to create a piece to capture the spirit or the sadness of what has happened as a result of these gun deaths. Okay, so there's 3 different examples using similar data sets, all with very different goals and emotional context, all of which use emotion, but to a different degree to make them be very successful forms of data visualization. So I go to work every day mostly at Visa is my main customer, and I don't have a lot of time to build these beautiful data visualizations, nor is it necessarily appropriate to always put emotion on credit card transaction processing. But there are little things you can do, and here's an example that was my submission for the Iron Viz contest last year. For those of you that don't know the Iron Viz, it will be taking place later this week. And Tableau Public has 3 contests, and each of the winners of those contests have to compete on stage. They get a data set a few days ahead of time, but on stage they only have 20 minutes to build an entire visualization. And there's people talking the whole time and tweeting, so it's very hectic. So I had received this information on tornadoes, and I'm from California, and I don't really know much at all about tornadoes. Had it been earthquakes, I would have probably had a million things to say. But I did a lot of research on the data in the couple days that I had, and I wanted to create a story about, well, why are tornadoes interesting? What is fascinating about them? And again, we had talked initially about product constraints, and a lot of the constraints in this was the data was organized in a very bizarre way. So it was very hard to roll things up by year or over time and link that to maybe other data like demographic data or socioeconomic data. My original concept had been I had wanted to look at people in areas that have lower incomes tend to have more fatalities and more destruction. The reasoning behind that is people live in, say, trailer homes or types of homes that aren't necessarily as stable, and therefore they sustain more damage and more fatalities. It was very hard, like I said, with the data to link it, and 20 minutes on stage, I didn't want to do it. So I came up with another concept of this, we always hear about Tornado Alley, and was Tornado Alley really where the most tornadoes occurred? So you can see this before picture, and this is basically just using the default Tableau, what would happen if I built this viz, and that would take about maybe 5 to 10 minutes to build this from scratch. And again, it's great. You see all the detail. There is no really different information in the other, in the final version of the product. But I just want to show within 20 minutes how much impact you can add. So some of the things I did to add design and emotion. Obviously, I used the color scheme of red to talk about fatalities, blood, bad. I changed the color scheme. When I thought of tornadoes, I kind of thought of dirt swirling up in the air. So I kind of made it more like a rustic kind of dirt theme. And I did a lot with the annotation layer. That was actually one of the things I played with the most. Like I said, being from California, tornadoes really aren't all that much interest to me. But I thought, well, how can I make every person relate to this? And of course, I'm going to go with 95% of the people have seen The Wizard of Oz. So I started with a sentence talking about Dorothy, because instantly everyone is drawn to, oh yeah, Dorothy being torn away with the house and the witch. So kind of that way to draw people in. I focused on mentioning the specific year 1952 in the title so that people would be forced to kind of go down here and go, well, that's 1952. That actually wasn't necessarily the worst year out of everything. I kind of talked about the U.S. Air Force, and I gave it this kind of New York Timesy, very minimalist design look and feel because I wanted it to be valid, right? I wanted people to go, oh, well, this must be like a scientific, well studied out presentation. So again, just using a couple design tricks, the annotation layer, a little cleaned up formatting, and adding kind of an impactful color scheme, within 20 minutes, you know, even at your job, could use these type of skills to kind of make your product a little bit more interesting and exciting. So when someone opens it up every day to see what's going on, they're like, wow, this draws me in. I look forward to seeing this report every day because it's providing me value. I find it engaging, I find it interesting, and I find it useful. I'm going to walk through just 2 more examples of projects that I created. This one I just kind of did for fun. It was on fireworks data. And here would be the original viz, just presented using the basic standard Tableau formatting. Again, it's a great viz, right? Obviously, oh my God, this is 4th of July. People do a lot of silly stuff with fireworks on the 4th of July. And it's broken down by gender and age. So again, a very newsy piece conveying when the firework injuries occur, who does them, what parts of the body they injure. Most of the injuries are by males, and it's interesting, men tend to blow up their hands and fingers. If you filtered on women, they actually tend to blow up their heads and their neck. And then you look at fatalities, you know, little kids unfortunately do get hurt a lot by sparklers. Only on the 4th of July period, really, New Year's Eve, little kids aren't affected at all. So it's interesting data, doesn't really need much cleaning up or work. But I did want to make it a really interesting piece and draw people in. And I had kind of thought the initial concept was I wanted it to be like almost a public service announcement, like be safe and sane with your fireworks this year. So I wanted to add some kind of cartoony imagery, and my initial inspiration was the Dumb Ways to Die video, which is done in Australia, an ad for their metro about not stepping on off the platform onto the tracks, et cetera. And they go through all these silly ways to die, but don't die on the metro. And then a lot of people in, probably dating myself, remember Schoolhouse Rock, where we have kind of these educational, slightly humorous videos that teach you something. So I was kind of going for something like that. And just to clarify, I'm not anti-firework. I'm probably the biggest pyro in the neighborhood. I go out every year and buy the massive box, and then I keep them in my basement and blow stuff up like the Giants win the World Series. Woo, fireworks, New Year's Eve, fireworks, birthday party. I love fireworks. So I just want people to be safe and sing with them. So how do I create a product that makes people want to pay attention to the data about fireworks, but in a way that's kind of humorous, so it's not too lectury, it's just more fun. So I have a friend, Ray, who used to be an illustrator for Pokemon, and I said, hey, can you help me come up with some little British redcoats and little colonial guys, and it would be kind of funny and tongue-in-cheek if they were blowing each other up. So here we are celebrating 4th of July and Independence Day, and how do we celebrate it? By blowing ourselves up. It just seemed kind of silly. And we talked about different concepts of, well, do we actually show them with the injury, like, oh, they have their hand and finger injury, or do we kind of use a background image and plot the image on the character itself? And so here's kind of a very rough draft where we talked about, okay, well, here we would put like little explosions on the person, depending on, you know, if you clicked on male, there would be more on the hand. If you clicked on female, the circle on his face would get larger. And the other concept we kind of played with was, or do we just show the actual injury itself? And here I had a couple of them ready, put on the bar chart. So we're just kind of playing with different looks and feels. But then one day I went to a meeting downtown at a place called Yeti Fan, and it's a place where gamers go to work on products and develop new video games. And I saw a lot of this imagery of like superheroes. And so then I kind of thought, okay, the fireworks and the explosion, and I remember the old Batman cartoons with Batman and Robin, and every time they hit a bad guy, it would go bang, pow, and one of these like cartoon imageries would come up. So I kind of wanted to play with something a little bit more like that. So we worked on, again, these images and trying to create more of a comic book look and feel down below of each of the different injuries as like squares, and kind of played with different color schemes and different layouts in order to kind of mimic that cartoon, like comic book look and feel. And again, so here you can see plotted out with the body parts, very different color scheme. Some of the things we used was images of the titles, because you can't embed fonts in Tableau, and I wanted to use these very cartoony fonts, I would actually cut and paste the dashboard into Photoshop and then create the images, save them in, and add them later as floating images in Tableau. I went through lots of different iterations. So this project, I had at least a couple of weeks to work on it. And again, here I was taking different body parts being blown up and putting them on a bar chart. But I felt it kind of blocked the top of the bars and really kept you from seeing the total number of injuries per body part. So in that case, I thought it was distracting. And then down below, I thought, well, okay, I still want that cartoon look and feel, but somehow it didn't blend well with the rest of the dashboard. It seemed to kind of command attention and take it away. We tried balancing it out with an actual like fireworks superhero. He would be like, safe and sane man, play well with fireworks. And again, just playing with different layouts, trying to figure out, I love these little cartoon blown up people, but I couldn't figure out how to make them work in the viz and not distract from the data that I was trying to communicate. So after all that hard work on all the cartoons and blood and gore, I actually took almost all of the cartoons out, left the header in, which is just an image. But I really think the data, using this color scheme, popped it out. It still had that cartoon look and feel that made it kind of accessible and fun and really exaggerated the fact that, like, holy smokes, man, people do crazy things on 4th of July with fireworks. So again, here's just the side-by-side comparison. Again, not much as far as layout has changed, but just using the updated color schemes, the custom fonts, kind of this heavy grid outline, and adding a graphic title that was done outside of the Tableau, but done in Illustrator, really kind of pops the design, makes it much more interesting, and makes, when people open it up, I want to read this, I want to understand what's going on with 4th of July and fireworks. So this is the last one that we're going to look at. And this one was looking at Twitter data, and it was for a social media contest on Tableau Public. Because of my work schedule, I unfortunately only had about 2 nights to work on this. So from the get-go, I knew, okay, I want to do something with a Twitter look and feel so people get right away it's about Twitter data. So that's why the turquoise is in there, that Twitter blue. I kind of had a working title, and I used a free 2-week trial from Viral to kind of look at the different topics. Anthony Weiner, NSA, Royal Baby, and Trayvon Martin, which at the time were all very hot topics in the news. And it was just using these search terms. So, for instance, with the search on NSA, I did not include Edward Snowden, and for Trayvon Martin, I did not include George Zimmerman. It was just for those key phrases if they showed up anywhere in Twitter. So this was the initial layout. It would allow you to kind of compare the topics over time and how they were trending. If it was unique authors or if it was just people retweeting the same old stuff over and over again. So unique messages, average tweets per author, kind of looking at engagement, and then the retweet percent. And then down below, you were able to see the top authors and the messages that were popping out. So this was pretty good. This could have been just fine as it is. But then I started looking at some of the tweets, and you see in Trayvon Martin, there's some things that are just so offensive, talking about, Barack, oh no, in 35 years, Trayvon Martin could be president, right? Or looking at the NSA, people are talking about Google and talking about privacy. So that's actually interesting. Anthony Weiner, everything is, of course, a Weiner joke. Wow, really? And then the Royal Baby is, most people talking about Minions. Minions, oh, it's the new Royal Baby, and, poor baby is already being teased. So I started reading these tweets, and I was kind of conflicted, and I love Shel Silverstein. He was one of my favorite authors when I was young. And I had originally kind of thought of Twitter as this great democracy of voices, right? Everyone has a chance to tweet. Everyone can build Twitter followers and say what they want. It's a wonderful place for you to speak your mind, and if people are interested, they can listen. But then when I started reading a lot of these tweets, it was just very like blah, 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 and frustrating. So then I thought of another one of Shel Silverstein's poems, which was Jimmy Jet and his TV set. And it's just about this little boy that watches so much TV that eventually turns into a TV set, and now his family just watches him. And I like this one because it was kind of that concept of Twitter, where Twitter actually becomes the news itself. It's not that the Royal Baby was born, it's what people are saying about the Royal Baby. And it's not about Anthony Weiner and him being a little odd, but about people making jokes about him. And so all of a sudden people making a joke become the news story more than the news itself. And so taking that, I kind of said, well, how could I make this have a more kind of homage to Shel Silverstein and that kind of very comedic, cartoony look again about it. So I started playing with just the outline and the color scheme of the boxes, again, just making it a thicker black outline. Once I created that layout, I cut and pasted into Photoshop, and then actually I would just type out the titles, which are kind of in a handwritten, cartoony font, copy them, save them as images, and then paste them back into the Tableau dashboard as a floating image. And the final product here is shown as kind of that look and feel of the TV set. There's a remote to pick on the different filters. Instead of a TV remote, it's the remote for the tweets. And again, the TV with just kind of that static, overwhelming blah, blah, blah coming at you. And then, of course, the voices down below, the people fixated on this Twitter TV set and what's happening on Twitter, what's going on. It's this live blog of the world. So that was the final product. So walking through these examples, you can kind of see a few ideas about how, from the very basic, like the tornado visualization, to the very complex, doing the Twitter Photoshop example. You can use design and emotion to create a data visualization product that somebody would want to consume, and it has a lot of impact, and therefore people are eager to look at it, and that's why it's a success. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to any questions or comments.